Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book-loving, notebook-hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of books and reading and notebooks and writing to make life better and to feel better too. You'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how it can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebook invitations around particular themes, and you'll meet authors and special guests who'll help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So grab a notebook and your TBR list and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your host, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's guest. Now, here on this podcast, we explore how reading and writing can make life better. And while we spend many episodes talking about the how and why behind that process, it really comes down to one thing: the power of stories. Reading stories to explore, to learn, to connect and grow, and even writing our own stories, even if no one else sees them in our private notebook. Now, I'm not talking about fictional stories, although I certainly love those, but our actual stories, the stories of our lives. Today's guest is here to explore those stories with us, the craft and the art of memoirs. Wendy Dale is a memoir writing coach and the author of the Memoir Engineering System. And whether you journal your life stories in a private notebook that no one sees, or you have a dream to have your memoir be shared with the world, this episode, I think, is for you. So let's get right to it. Wendy, welcome to the Get Literate podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
I'm so glad to be here, Stephanie. Thank you.
So I want to start the old-fashioned way, which is with introductions. Could you tell us a little bit more about you and your work, and just give us a peek into the work that you do?
Sure. My name is Wendy Dale. I am the author, as you said, of the Memoir Engineering System. It's a book that took me a really long time to write. I spent 15 years analyzing thousands of memoir texts to figure out what all memoirs have in common, partly because structure is something that most writers struggle with, and I definitely raise my hand when it comes to struggling with structure. I'm definitely one of those people. That has been the hardest thing that I've dealt with in my writing career. So I also am the author of the memoir Avoiding Prison and Other Noble Vacation Goals, which is a humorous account of a lot of trouble I got into when I was in my 20s in foreign countries.
Best title ever, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, thank you. I wanted to make people laugh. So that's how I deal with pain, as I use humor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how did you go from writing your memoir to helping others tackle that?
Well, I had a really hard time getting my memoir published. So I didn't have a hard time writing the first draft of my memoir. I thought it was great. But the publishing world didn't agree with me. And it really was this learning process of understanding that a publishable memoir, now you can write to heal, but if you're writing for an audience, there is a difference, and that it's not just a bunch of random, albeit interesting stories from your life, that you have to have plot. So that was the first huge learning curve for me, was understanding what memoir really is. And it's not just a bunch of interesting stories. I think a lot of people get told, oh, you should write a book. You have such interesting stories. Yes, you should write a book because you have interesting stories. If you can connect them and turn them into a book, find the plot in those interesting stories. Mm-hmm. So I learned from my own mistakes. I was lucky enough to find an agent. Back then, agents would really help you sometimes, if they believed in your work, restructure the book. So I was lucky to find an agent. She said, I love your narrative voice. You know nothing about structure. And I remember the words that went through my head were, what is this structure thing she's talking about, right? I had never even heard the word. And so that was the beginning of this very long journey of understanding what it means to write a book that others want to read. That memoir isn't just a bunch of disconnected stories from your life, you need plot.
Yeah. I'm so glad you started off with that because, as you mentioned, here on this podcast, we talk a lot about reading and writing to heal. And that really comes down to stories, and whether that's reading other people's stories, to which thankfully they've figured out the process of publishing their memoirs, or it's writing our own. A lot of that time, those stories are in private notebooks that are hidden under our beds or in between our mattresses, or places where we're getting some of our stories out, but we don't necessarily want or need anyone to read them. They're still our stories, they're still important, but they are ours. And there is a difference when you make that decision to then share those stories with others. I would love to know from your perspective and what you've learned, what what is it about a publishable memoir? As you said, these are different than just our notebooks. What is it about a publishable memoir that does set it apart? What did you learn about that structure, that someone who might be listening saying, maybe I do want to go public with my story. I have a story that someone can benefit from. What what do they need to know about that difference?
So let me start by, before talking about what makes something publishable, let me talk about maybe why you would want to publish something
Mm,
and why that is part of the healing process.
yes.
I think that understanding that our stories have so much in common and getting rid of shame and not being afraid of what goes out in the world of yours can be a really important part of the healing process. There's a quote I love, and I really try and live by this, and it says, try to live your life so that anything you do or say, if it's published about you, if it's said about you, you won't be ashamed, even if what is said is not true. And that is really powerful to really get over that, to get over what people are going to think about you is one of those steps. And I think another important thing is understanding that you're going to help other people, that we're all human, we're all dealing with the same things. I tell my students there are only so many emotions a human being can have. And when you really are able to put that emotion on the page, other people relate to you, even if your story is different. So I think there's a healing in helping other people as well, helping other people deal with the same issues that you have dealt with in your life. Books are filled with wisdom. Good books are filled with wisdom. So that's kind of the why someone might want to publish as part of their healing process.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between just writing for no one else to see, scribbling in your journal, writing just for the purpose of healing, and writing for someone else, I think, is understanding what makes a book good. That was part of this journey I went on. That was something that told me. And, it really is kind of a key question. What makes a book good? And there really are two answers to that question. One is structure. We can talk more about what structure actually means, but a quick answer is structure and subjective writing. So I talk in my book about two different kinds of writing. Now, all books, all stories, all published stories, all written stories have two kinds of writing. You have objective writing and subjective writing. Now, it's real commercial fiction, this detective novels, Michael Grisham, super commercial fiction has a lot of objective writing. It's basically description, lots of things happen.
Yeah.
Memoir and literary fiction has a lot more subjective writing. And subjective writing, the easy definition, the easiest way to understand this is anything that a video camera would not pick up. So those are the thoughts that go through your head. Dialogue is objective.
Mhm.
Anyone is going to hear the same dialogue who was there witnessing the scene with you, but it's your point of view. And there's a real richness in there. And one of the things that I love watching writers do when I work with them is they think that their book is supposed to describe in an objective way what that living room looked like. No one really cares. We really want to be inside your head and know what it felt like to be you in that moment. So that is actually good memoir writing.
Mm. I had never thought about the two kinds of like I love books and I'm into books all the time. And you're right. It's that writing where you are there. You are in the character's head. You are feeling what they're feeling. You're doing whatever they're doing. That is the piece that I feel has the potential to heal because you're literally experiencing it along with them. Where at first, when you said objective, subjective, I thought, oh, nonfiction and then a different genre. But no, no, that just kind of opened up my mind. Now I'm going to be reading my books differently. Like, oh, that was too objective. Or this is the subjective stuff that I want.
Can I tell you, one of the assignments mine's complete is we take books, we take memoirs, and I have them take a highlighter and highlight the subjective writing
Yeah.
just to get a sense of what the difference is and also how important it is. And then they hold up the work they've done, the highlighted text, and there's so much more highlighted text than non-highlighted text, so much more subjective writing than objective writing.
Mm,
And it's fun. I free people up and they can say, oh, that's what's good writing, because I've been doing the opposite. I've been trying to describe and help people understand what everything in that living room looked like, the feel of the couch and the color of the paint. And I'm like, who cares?
yeah.
I want to know what it felt like to have this discussion with your mother. I
Yeah.
don't care what color the couch was. So, and neither does your reader.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in your book about, some myths perhaps that you can let go of and show, don't tell, right?
And that's exactly what I'm saying. I
Yeah,
think people feel the need to show what the living room looked like. And I think you should tell me what you were feeling. You
yeah.
should tell me the thoughts that went through your head. So I find that show don't tell is not false. I feel like it's misinterpreted. And a
Mhm.
lot of times it's interpreted on different YouTube channels or in different books, as you really should. You want to give your reader this visual experience.
Yeah.
And I really disagree. I think your goal as a memoir writer or as a novelist is to give your reader an emotional experience.
Mhm.
And the way you do that is with subjective writing.
Yeah. So let's say that there is a listener who's listening who's only ever just written in private notebooks, but had this little idea, sprouting in their mind and decides, you know what? Maybe I'll give that a try. Maybe I will give a memoir a try. If I were to say those words out loud, I know I would instantly become overwhelmed because I'm 40 something years old. And is it a bed to bed story? Is it a from the beginning to now? And what do I include and what don't I include? And what are the big moments? And how do I know if someone wants to read about that? How do you help someone who has decided, I want to attempt to write a memoir, know where to start?
So the first thing I would say to you is there is a difference between autobiography and memoir. So the first thing is understanding that non-famous people shouldn't be writing their autobiographies, right? Autobiography is kind of the beginning of your life up till now and a little bit of everything. And we're just not interested in everything that you lived through. No one cares about everything I lived through. No one cares about, in general, it would be incredibly boring. I call this diary style writing. It's just a little bit of everything. That's not plot. So the first thing you need to decide is what part of your life you want to write about. And that actually makes things a lot easier. Do you want to write about that year in college when everything changed? Do you want to write about the men in your life? Do you want to write about your relationship with your mother? Do you want pick a story instead of your entire life. So the first step is understanding what memoir is. And the next thing I would say to someone is make a list of what happened. Figure out what happened within that story. So if you're going to write about your relationship with your mother, start with a list of what happened. And this is actually really important because people will say things like, well, I went through this period where I was really sad. And I will say to them, okay, but what happened? Because that is not what happened. And one of the things in this 15-year period of understanding what all memoirs have in common, what plot really is, it starts with things happening. So this is a huge mistake I see when people try to write their memoir, is that nothing happens. They describe their life. So yes, we want you to put us inside your head with subjective writing, but things have to happen. You have to have an argument with your mother. You have to go to the pool one day with your mother and have this incredible heart-to-heart. The things that happen don't have to be huge. Your mother one day says to you while you're at the pool, your sister is struggling in school. I don't know, right? But that could change everything. It changes your relationship with your mother or your sister, but something has to happen. Mm-hmm. And so the problem I see is that nothing happens in memoir writers' books. So I start with working with them, what happens? It sounds really simple, but it's so important.
Yeah, you've just blown my mind a second time, actually. The whole objective subjective thing got me the first time, but the difference between an autobiography and a memoir just hit home because, those are the thoughts we have. Well, who would want to know about me? I'm not famous. I don't have this big old place in the world where everybody knows who I am. But the way that you just broke it down, okay, then fine, you're not famous. And then someone doesn't want to know every last little detail of your life. But we all have a story of something that would be worth telling to help someone else. And that's the memoir. And the memoir just has to be, or could just be a small moment, or maybe a larger, but a moment in time and not your entire life. And I feel like you just systematically kicked down the excuses that a lot of us have because everybody has that story. That thing that we can't stop writing about in our notebook likely is something someone else would want to know about when you're on the other side. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I love it.
Oh,
you made
my memoirs.
Super. I love that.
Wow. Wow, that's so empowering. It feels like almost instantly it reminds us that something of our life is meaningful, to share with someone else and help on the other side, which of course is the whole podcast of reading and learning and healing from the books that we read. And why not us? Why not us to tell one of those stories?
Well, something I often say to my students is the more personal your writing is, the more universal it becomes. And it is very strange and counterintuitive, but I found this to be true. And the reason is that your life can be so different than mine. I learned this lesson early on in my memoir writing teaching career. It's been nearly 20 years when I had this student. And I remember I hadn't yet read her writing. And she came into my class, my online class, and she had been a former heroin addict and had lived on the streets. And then she married one of the wealthiest men in Australia and was very concerned with looking beautiful and having lots of plastic surgery. So none of that had really any relevance to my life. That was kind of the bio she gave us before I saw her writing. So I'm like, not gonna have anything in common with this woman. I read her writing and was blown away. I felt like she was describing my life on the page. And this is really when I learned this concept. And I realized that, I may not have ever been a heroin addict living on the streets, but I know what it's like to be scared.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to feel like other people are judging me. And I really started to understand that really we have so much in common. And so even though her story was nothing like mine, I felt the exact same thing she felt. And I
Mhm.
think that is the power of memoir writing.
The connection, the true
Yeah,
deep connection to another human. Yeah.
that we're all the same, that she felt the exact same things I had felt. My story was different, but our emotions are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Even my thoughts were very similar to hers. And that's one reason I talk a lot about subjective writing. When you put your thoughts down on the page, I understand you. And I think, wow, I've thought those same things in my very different life because we're
Mhm.
all struggling. We're really all dealing with the same things. Our stories are different, the events are different, but we're all in this fight together, you know? We really are. That's what makes us human.
Yeah. So if we have our list, we have our time period, so to speak, that we want to talk about, and we have our list of what happens, and I imagine that then moves into the subjective writing and how we're feeling. What does come next after we figure out a time and we brainstorm what happens? Where do you take your writers next?
So I really do suggest an outline. So what we're talking about, figuring out what your book is about and writing down. When I say write out what happens, I'm talking about a one sentence description of everything that happens, this long list. You've already begun the outlining process. So I do not love outlining. In fact, I hate it. But when I started to understand that when you understand memoir structure and when you create the right kind of outline, you will literally save yourself years of rewriting. I was like, well, the month it takes me to outline my book is a really great return on my investments. Investing a month to save maybe 7 years sounds like something I suddenly want to do, even if I hate that month. So I really relate to people who hate outlining because I raise my hand, I am one of them. But it really is worth it. And once you've created this outline doesn't even have to be very good, right? But once you've created it, it actually makes writing so much better. It frees you up. Writing is so much more fun. And when you have this outline for your book, you can say, well, I really don't feel like writing that scene with my mother at the pool today because I just don't want to go there. I'll do that a few weeks from now. I'm going to write this scene because this is the mood I'm in. I'm going to write this scene about my father at Christmas. I don't know, right? And so it really is freeing, creatively freeing. So I would say write an outline. And one of the things I talk about in the book in terms of craft is that one of the things I discovered in this 15-year process is that you have these two building blocks in your book, and they're scenes and transitions. So scenes are where something happens. So what happens in my book, you have created the scene list for your book, and your transitions are where you're going to connect those scenes to create plot. So that's a long, complicated process, but basically it's understanding your scenes and your transitions. And I have people create an outline that is based on scenes and transitions. Something different goes in your transitions than your scenes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm 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 not stuck. I'm another a little bit of blown away about the fact that you do not have to write this in chronological order. I'm a rule follower. I am an outliner. Let me tell you, Wendy, we
Oh,
will
you
be
are.
opposite. I will outline just to outline. I love it so much.
Oh, I love to hear that. I do. Yeah.
And I don't know why, because I've written nonfiction books before, and I do not write those in order, but for some reason in my head, writing my story, I felt like must have to be this chronological order thing. But the beauty of what you said of jotting those events, you can move around based on what you feel like, even though it technically is in a chronological order. I get to address what I want when I'm ready to, and that feels really empowering.
Oh, you mean, yes, you don't have to write them out chronologically. There is some sense of chronology in your memoir,
Yes,
right? We need
yes.
a beginning, middle, end, but you don't have to write it chronologically.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about healing and using reading and writing for that purpose, like you said, if your mood's not there or you're not ready or you need to write here to move through this memoir writing and the way that you do it just feels like another tool for self-growth. Am I on that? Like,
It,
do you feel that? Do your students feel that?
absolutely. And let me, I love structure and I love craft. But I think there's something really interesting in the craft of memoir writing that pushes you through this healing process. And let me explain.
Sweet.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot of memoirs, I would say most of them, are so we have two. I tell people most memoirs, you have two different narrators in your book. You have the person you are now who is actually writing the book, and there is the person who lived through events. And most memoirs have both of those narrators. So, what does this mean for healing? We have the person you are now piecing your life together in a different way. So, the memoir you write when you're 20 is going to be very different than the memoir you write when you're 60, even if you were to write about the same time period, because you look at it in a different way. And so, by piecing your life together as a writer, you're telling yourself a different, you're rewriting your narrative. And I
Mm.
think there's something really incredible about that. And another thing is that structure is really the art of connecting your stories. I call structure really is connected events. And in finding these new connections that you didn't realize at the time, you're also healing yourself. You're understanding what these stories from your life have in common. You're understanding the theme of your life, which is kind of incredible.
Yes, it is. And I'm feeling like, I'm mentally going through the notebooks that I have kept, whether it's my morning page notebook, it's the notebook that, that I call my therapy that no one will ever see. Whatever it is, I'm realizing now, like this is when I think, oh gosh, we record this in real time and Stephanie's having epiphanies while her listeners are listening to her. But I'm looking at those notebooks with new eyes right now. Like in my mind, those notebooks are just it's to get stuff out, it's to get past it, it's to dump things, it's to work through things. But now I'm thinking of the power of revisiting those notebooks, which I don't usually do. But what you just said is so true. It's a different version of you, looking back at a different version of you, which is just full of potential for growing and healing. Whether you're putting them together in a formal structure or not, the fact that we can say like I'm a double narrator, right? My me now and my me net. I'm me then. That's
Yeah.
wow.
So I ask people, how do you put these two narrators in your book? Usually in the scene itself, we want to feel the younger you. So if it's you at the pool talking to your mother about your sister, I want to feel what it's like to be 12, having this conversation with your mother. This is the scene itself. And in the transition, following that scene, again, your book is divided into scenes and transitions. These are your two building blocks. The transition itself usually has this reflection from the point of view of the person you are now, interpreting this in a different way, that 12-year-old didn't understand what that really meant, but you have the benefit of hindsight. So you can add lots of insight into your book, often because a 12-year-old's perspective usually isn't that interesting to an adult. The
Mhm.
difference between YA literature and adult literature about childhood usually is the addition of that older, wiser narrator. So if I'm writing a YA novel, my protagonist might be 14 and she's always 14. And it's a book about a 14-year-old and being 14. If I'm writing a book for adults about my childhood, usually the difference is that other perspective. I'm writing it from the perspective of the person I am now looking back.
Right. So you mentioned, writing your memoir at 20 versus writing your memoir at 60, two completely different things. Is there a right time to write your
No.
memoir? Right? Because
I
in my
wrote
mind,
my
memoir writing comes later. Like I
I
need to have but now that I don't have to write about my whole life, right? And I can write about a powerful moment of it. I feel
yeah.
like someone could write 4 or 5 memoirs throughout their whole entire life.
That's exactly what I would love for people to do. Now, I wrote my memoir in my 20s. I would have written about the same time period with a very different perspective now. Was my 20-year-old version wrong? No, it was just different.
Mm-hmm.
So, absolutely, that is what I suggest people do. In fact, people often come into my classes and they think, I'm going to write about this period and this period and this period and this period. And I tell them, actually, yes, maybe you should write 5 different books because it's too much. You'll
Yeah.
overwhelm your reader. One portion of your life, one phase of your life at a time.
Mm. How do they choose?
I tell them to write about what speaks to them now.
Yeah.
Really, what are you dying to write now? What are you closest to? You may not write a second book. So, and sometimes people are like, oh, I want to save the good stuff for book 3.
We
And I tell them,
always
you
want to
may
say
not
the good stuff. I know, the good notebook, the good whatever it is. We always want to
do
say
it now. No, give me the best stuff now because you'll become a better writer in doing so, and you're going to have more good stuff.
yeah. So I have another logistical question. And thinking about someone who might want to pick that time period of their lives, do you recommend going backwards so you have those 2 narrators, or can someone be in something and realize, okay, this is the story I have to tell, but I'm still in it? How does that work?
It's it's hard to write a memoir that you don't know the ending to.
Yeah.
It's just hard from a
Yeah.
logistical purpose. I remember hearing this interview with Tobias Wolff on NPR many years ago. So I'm going to paraphrase what I remember him saying because I don't literally remember the words, but I remember the gist of what he said. And he said, you should write about what has hurt you the most, but only after it's quit hurting you. So I do think you need a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of perspective. It's really hard to be in the middle of a messy divorce. Now, I think you should journal it. I think you should write it down for
Right.
future use. That is when journaling, and that's when processing it. Oh, absolutely, write it all down. But when you're writing for an audience, we're looking for that wisdom. Yes, we want to understand the pain you went through because we will relate to that pain. But what we're really looking for is the wisdom you got on the other side of it. So if you're going to write a memoir, I do suggest you pick something you were on the other side of.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And that is a very powerful quote. I love
Yeah.
that one. Okay. Oh boy. So now everybody in their car, if they're walking their dog, they're doing their dishes right now, whatever it is, I know they're all thinking, okay, what would my section be? What would I write about? What wisdom could I share with someone else? And you've given us so much to think about in terms of the big picture of the why, the big picture with the how. You've dropped these little truth bombs about craft and structure and scenes and transitions, and you've packaged them together. So I want listeners to know that you have a book. Like if someone is saying, okay, I kind of want to do this, or I'm feeling that urge to do that. Tell us about your book, The Memoir Engineering System.
So what I wanted to do was figure out the concepts that all memoirs rely on. I once upon a time tried to figure out when I was trying to figure out how to structure my memoir, when I realized I didn't have structure, I went to other memoirs and tried to figure out what they were doing. And I couldn't find the seams because the books were so well constructed and I really couldn't figure out what they were doing. And it wasn't until I started teaching memoir writing and getting student assignments and getting flawed assignments that I could see the problems. It's like watching a bad movie. You're like, oh, you start to understand how movies are constructed. When you watch a good movie, it's really hard to figure out what's making it work.
Yeah.
So what I did was a 15-year period, I started little by little trying to fix these problems I saw. And every time there was a mistake, there was an error, I would say, how would I fix that? And in understanding how I would fix it, I would come to a principle. I would come to these principles that all memoirs need to follow. Because these writing assignments I would see fell into categories. There are only so many mistakes you can make as a writer when you're structuring your memoir, which is actually a huge relief.
It is.
So I wanted to, right? So I wanted to prevent these mistakes from happening in the first place. So I worked backwards and went, oh, there's a principle at play here. So the book is about the principles that all memoirs need to follow. And I talk a little bit about these principles. And in the end, there's a 7-step process for how to build your memoir from the ground up so that you have no structural errors. So it's called the Memoir Engineering System. You can, easiest way, depending on where you are in the world, is to just type that into Google. I also offer courses and coaching. My company is called my company is called Memoir Writing for Geniuses, which is kind of tongue in cheek. It was playing off of Memoir Writing for Dummies. So don't take me too
I love
seriously.
it.
We don't
I love it.
You can Google Memoir Writing for Geniuses, or the easiest way to find us is to go to freememoirclass.com, which will take you to our website.
And get a free memoir class?
You can get a free memoir class, as the title would imply. Yes, you
Yeah.
can get a free 7-part class on how to structure a memoir.
Okay. I was just clarifying because my ears are like, ooh, okay. 'Cause I will be honest with you, Wendy, coming into this episode, I was really excited to meet you and to learn. I love reading memoirs. I just feel like they're so powerful. I had no intentions of ever thinking that I could write one or that anyone would ever want to read it. But just hearing you talk, you just knocked down a lot of the things I thought about memoirs with that autobiographical versus memoir, with the what happened versus the feeling. All of those things have me realizing that we all could write one. You know, we all have a story that if we tell it, even if it never does get published, but we write it as if it could, we first could heal, but then end up being that person that was brave enough to put their story out there so that someone else has what I have from all the memoirs that I devour, which is the opportunity to learn and grow alongside of the person who was brave enough to tell it. So I feel like you've just opened up a lot of closed areas in my mind on the topic. So when I hear free memoir, I thought, oh, okay, maybe that would be for me. So thank you. That you've really opened my mind to why little old me and everybody listening should and could consider this for themselves.
Well, my work is done. Thank you. I love changing people's lives as well. And I love memoir. And I do think it's possible. I think it can be really intimidating and frustrating. And I know that because I was once that person who was frustrated and overwhelmed by it. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I do what I do, because people have an important message and it needs to get out, but they're intimidated by the process of actually writing this intimidating memoir. And I really think it's not that intimidating if you know what makes a book good and you understand structure.
Yeah. Oh, you've got a worthy mission that literally could change everybody's lives. That's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me talk about it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for just dropping all of those mic drop moments and making my head spin with things that maybe I think all of us should be considering. Just yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank you,
much.
Stim.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I will put links to the places that you mentioned, your website, the free memoir class. Are there any other places where listeners can reach you online? Any social medias or anything else you'd like to share?
I have a YouTube channel, so with lots of videos. And again, if you just Google "Memoir Writing for Geniuses," it will take you to my YouTube channel.
Okay. I will be sure to put that in the notes as well. And of course, links to your book so that they can get
Perfect.
that. Thank you again. This was just wonderful. You've opened my mind, and listeners, I hope You stopped washing the dishes for a moment or just paused on your walk and realized that she's talking to you too. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned on the episode in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Substack community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, bibliotherapy book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and much more. It's only $5 a month, and you'll get instant access to all of the previous content too. You can learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish and notebookish communities too. Thanks for listening.